Okay, well, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar about BikeWalkRoll. It's hosted by Green Communities Canada. As I mentioned, we're going to be keeping everyone in the audience on mute throughout the webinar. So if you have any technical issues or problems with audio quality, please use the chat box function. Send your message to everyone and we'll be tracking that chat box throughout the webinar. We are recording this webinar and we'll make the slides and the recording available on our website. So hello, my name is Kate Berry. I'm the Programme Director for Ontario Active School Travel, and that's a programme of Green Communities Canada. GCC is a national association of community organisations that work to reduce our impact on the environment. We have been a leading organisation promoting active school travel since 1996, and we do that through research, advocacy, training, educational resources, events, partnerships, and on-the-ground programming. The goal for our Ontario Active School Travel Programme is to make walking, cycling, and other forms of active and sustainable transportation the norm for school trips. The Ontario government is providing Green Communities Canada with $3.5 million over 3 years to take active school travel to the next level in this province. And that's from October 2017 through to August 2020. So today's webinar is all about BikeWalkRoll. It's an online tool for measuring school travel. I'm really pleased to be joined by 4 other presenters today who are primed to share their knowledge and experience with us. Anders Swanson is the project manager for BikeWalkRoll, and he will give us a quick guide introduction to the tool. We'll then hear from Sean Carlson over at Green Action Centre in Winnipeg. And Sean has been using BikeWalkRoll for the past 2 years as part of the Active and Safe Routes to School programme in Manitoba. We will then move east to Ontario and hear from staff at the Student Transportation Services of Waterloo region, who have been an early adopter of BikeWalkRoll in this province. So Alex Ricci is a school travel planning facilitator. He'll describe how he has been introducing BikeWalkRoll to the schools he supports. And Leslie Maxwell is a school travel planning supervisor, and will discuss the bigger picture and how BikeWalkRoll can support region-wide coordination for student transportation. And we'll have some time at the end of the session for questions and discussions. So please type your questions into the chat box, send them to everyone, and we'll track the questions and we'll work through them together after the presentations. So before I hand over to our presenters, I'd like to just provide some context to set the scene. In 2016, Ryerson University conducted research on behalf of Metrolinx to examine international best practices in regional planning for school travel. And a key finding from that work was that coordinated data collection was present in all of the best practice case studies that were included. Metrolinx then commissioned Ryerson University to continue with a second research initiative to explore best practices in coordinated data collection. The research was conducted in partnership with Green Communities Canada, and the final report was published in August of 2018. The research examined 10 case studies that demonstrate innovative approaches and tools that contribute to evidence-based strategies for active school travel. A key finding and recommendation from the research was that modal split should be a primary key performance indicator for the evaluation of active and sustainable school travel. And interestingly, 80% of the featured case studies still used paper-based techniques for data collection. Only 2 case studies of the 10 had developed and adopted online data collection tools. One was the Mode Shift program in England, and the other was BikeWalkRoll in Manitoba. So BikeWalkRoll is a web application developed and maintained by Green Action Centre based in Winnipeg. It's designed specifically to be used in the classroom, and it's quick, easy, and engaging. And the best thing is it's free to use. The format is a hands-up survey, and research studies support that as being a valid, reliable, and cost-effective tool to determine travel mode to school among elementary school children. As you will hear from our presenters today, the mode share data collected by by BikeWalkRoll is highly valuable to schools, to school boards, to municipalities, and student transportation service providers. The tool now includes a coordinated campaign function that those organizations can use to conduct a district-wide or a region-wide travel survey. So this is a really powerful tool for us to measure school travel behavior at the population level. The Ryerson University research recognized BikeWalkRoll as an innovative and easy-to-use tool for coordinated data collection for school travel. It noted that the inbuilt features of the tool allow schools to see their progress towards active school travel goals, with the BikeWalkRoll score providing a ready-made key performance indicator for schools. So before we hand over to Anders Swanson to provide a quick guide to BikeWalkRoll, we'd like to know how many of you in the audience today have already used this tool. So you'll see a poll question appear on your screen now, so please vote by clicking on one of the response options. And I'll just give everyone 30 seconds to do that. Okay, great. So we'll end the poll. And here are the results. So over 90% of our audience today have never used BikeWalkRoll. So welcome to BikeWalkRoll. You'll find out lots today. And we've got a few people who have some experience of use. Okay, great. That's really informative. Thanks, everyone. Okay. I'd now like to welcome Anders Swanson to present a quick guide to BikeWalkRoll. Anders, over to you to share your screen.
Hello, everyone. Just making sure that I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Anders.
Super.
We can hear you.
Thank you. And now I've lost my screen. There we go. Thanks so much, everyone. It's I'm truly honored and excited to be here presenting with everyone. This is by far my favorite project to have been working on, and what I see as one of the most exciting steps in transportation planning, period. And I've been really, really lucky to work with some fabulous people on this project. And I know there's some of you in attendance, and some will be presenting later. Thanks, Kate, for the quick overview of BikeWalkRoll. The purpose of my presentation here is to enable you to quickly figure out how to use it, and to see what its overall power is. And then I'll be around for any specific questions that you may have. But first of all, just want to acknowledge Green Action Centre for spearheading this vision and investing and time, energy, and confidence in the team that has worked on it. Specifically, I'd like to also acknowledge Heart and Stroke Foundation, who also bought into the vision, saw how it was important, and provided most of the initial funding that got started. There's also, of course, just so many people across the country and around the world who have contributed. Most recently, the Green Communities Canada and the province of Ontario, who've been funding the newer developments of BikeWalkRoll. Those of you who have used it before or tried it a little will see that there's some really powerful new tools developed. And just really exciting that folks like Pierrito and that architectural association that's in Spain stepped up to, for example, do translation, and we're always expanding the translation of it. And it's just really, really exciting. These are the folks who've been most instrumental. I think I've captured most of them, but there are others as well. I presented on BikeWalkRoll before at a few different international conferences, and one of the things to I guess understand about this is that it was a distillation of so many, as Kate presented, there are all kinds of programs around the world that are working on active school travel and doing it in different ways. And this started with a literature review and a tools review as well. And we hit upon the Hands Up survey as one of the best ways to make a foray into the online world. So yeah, this builds on the work of thousands of, if not hundreds of thousands of teachers as well around the world who've been participating in the Active and Safe Routes to School program internationally since it was started in Denmark in 1976. So we've come a long way. First of all, yes, it's free and it's global, but here's how it works. Essentially, and this is, I imagine that a lot of the audience on here are school travel champions. The main thing I think to communicate to teachers is that it's a 30-second survey because they are so busy. What really makes BikeWalkRoll special is the fact that you get immediate feedback. So any of you who've done Hands Up survey on paper, you know that it takes, like I have, I've done a few different school travel planning projects, and I've led school travel planning at 2 schools specifically, and been working with Green Action Centers folks here in Manitoba on different things for some time. So I know full well that sitting in Excel is no fun. Entering data, also recognizing that when you do all that kind of hard work, you want people to see it and you want people to make decisions. And so the whole idea of BikeWalkRoll is to arm people immediately, the kind of people who are on the front line, like teachers, their parents, their superintendents, and NGOs across the country are working on it, with a public-facing result that shows what's actually going on. And I must say that if you look at the map of Winnipeg, and well, that'll come up a bit later, or some of the other regions where it's been used, whether you know anything about transportation for planning or not, at a glance, you'll see something special about transportation that you may not have known in your city, and it's all about youth and children. So the Hands Up survey works like this. The teachers ask a very simple question to their students, usually at attendance time, and they ask them separately each of these questions. So we have biking, walking, rolling. Rolling includes skateboards and wheelchairs, scooters. 2 different forms of transit, school bus and public transit, and who rode in a car. We also ask for absent, and that gives us an idea of the overall number of students in the class. But it's really quick. Once you get good at it, it's very, very quick. And it tells us important information. Each of those modes, of course, comes with its own needs in terms of infrastructure, in terms of promotion, or in terms of parking, for example. And each of them is something that school divisions, parents care a lot about. You'll also notice that it mimics the national standards that have been, national and international standards for doing this process. The results come in like this. So it shows you the number of people, and it shows you the percentage or modal split. And it ends up giving a score. The score is what makes it easy to cross-compare different schools. And one of the things that BikeWalkRoll is built on is sort of a sense of competitiveness, I guess, but also just in the school world, of course, you know, test scores matter, and so people care about that. But it's important to recognize, of course, that for BikeWalkRoll, we value measurement more than we value the actual score. And what I mean by that is what's measured gets managed. And the first step is getting a baseline so you know whether things are getting better or not. And obviously, schools can only do so much, but the first step is to get a score that gives you an idea of what's happening. Any score needs to be taken as a caveat. We could talk about that. We could have a whole webinar on big data analysis, but keep in mind, of course, that if you do one survey in one class in the middle of June, it'll be different than the results you might get in February. But in general, the more surveys you do, the more complete picture you develop, and every single survey is valid. Every single teacher who does a survey tells us more about school transportation than we knew before. Yeah, it's color-coded from red to green to make it simple. And here it's just for anyone. So if you're coming to this or you're explaining to someone else, this is how you find a school. It's pretty easy. This is from the perspective of a teacher, sitting down at their computer in the morning. To find a school, you can either search for it. You can look it up in the long list of schools. It's very interesting to just have a look at all the schools that participate in BikeWalkRoll. It's pretty staggering already. Or you can find it on the map. So depending on however you find easiest, you should be able to find a school quite easily. When you click on it, pulls up a little dialogue, you hit go, and then you show up at each school's profile. That profile tells you a little bit where it is, and if you scroll down in that profile, you'll see the history of all the counts that have been done, all the actions that have been done at that school. And you'll see a button up at the top that tells you how to do a survey, which brings you back to here. So that's the basics. Again, once you get good at it, it takes 30 seconds. It takes a little bit longer if you decide to do the return trip survey, which is something that we've added. Of course, this is an issue. Teachers are very, very busy, and they'll appreciate anyone who takes that into consideration. The whole project was taken into consideration. What we've tried to do is make it as quick as possible to get in, get out, get some data. If you want, you can then have a whole classroom time to talk about transportation and what it means with your students. But what we tell teachers is that this is really low impact and intended to make their life easier. And you can do that, you can help do that by directing them directly to their school. So that's one of the simplest things that we suggest for any facilitators just wanting to start out. So if you think about that one, teacher or homeroom teacher or phys ed teacher who's really keen on getting kids walking a bike to the school, who really wants to help, wants to do something, you can tell them right away to go to your school, and you can just send them a direct link. So it does work quite well, and requires time, energy. It's not to the point where it gets viral. All software projects require buy-in from stakeholders, and they always start small, and then they reach tipping points where everybody just thinks it's necessary to use it and thinks it's important, but it requires partners to be able to expand it and move it forward. So if you can get people right to their school just like this and send them the link, then you're in good shape. There's another way which you'll see a little bit more about that in some later presentation, but that is the viral way. And what I mean by that is school divisions and the school system is somewhat hierarchical by nature. So you've got a school division, for example, who's in charge. And if you can get your school division or your Ministry of Transportation or Ministry of Education together, or even just a large group of stakeholders, you can send that one email to everyone to suggest that, if you're going to do anything about school transportation, start now and get a baseline. BikeWalkRoll is set up to make that easy as well. We can go into more detail to how to exactly do that, but we've created some tools in BikeWalkRoll to let you do that. So as soon as someone buys in, then this kind of thing can happen. Part of the reason we want to do that is that we have to catch up. So if any of you who work in transportation planning know full well that we'll know down to the millisecond how long it takes to turn left to a new McDonald's that's going in, because we'll need to build a new signal or a new lane even. Unfortunately, for the past, say, 6 or 7 decades that we've doing modern transportation planning, we've really focused mostly on one mode. And I don't think anyone's will be surprised by that. And the question is how do we catch up quickly? BikeWalkRoll is intended to focus on children's transportation because it's within that planning window. So children are young, and 20 years from now, we can actually affect the built environment that they'll see. And one of the ways that it helps us do that is by showing at a glance some of the things that might be going on in the neighborhood. So even if you don't know this area or what city this is in or what's happening, you'll quickly see that some schools may or may not have better biking, walking conditions than others, or may have different programs. You'll often find, looking at the successful regions that have a lot of scores, that some of the lower scores will, for example, be a French immersion school with a large catchment area. Or you might have a school with a bike lane on it. that takes kids right to school, or it's in a traffic calm neighborhood. And you'll start to see patterns emerging visually that make planning easy and intuitive. So here's just an example. So the highest score on this screen is that 84 in the top corner. I happen to know that one has an in-house bike shop, a highly motivated principal in particular, and as a result, motivated teachers. And it also happens to have a protected bike lane running right in front of it now. So there's an example of the pattern, but I'll let Sean talk a little bit more about Winnipeg because he's coming up next. This is, I think this screenshot is a couple years old actually, but this is where there are schools participating around the world. It looks a little bit like that. And then lastly, just to tell you what's new. So since Green Communities Canada and the province of Ontario have invested in the project, we've been able to build return trip surveys, which is really exciting. We've also been able to add Schoolbus and Transit. We've also built some powerful new tools for you. That is building on some of the requests that have come up from the people who have used it. And basically, we like to take requests because that's how it'll get used more often. But first, just a quick note about the levels and accounts that are available to you. So Kate mentioned this, it's free. Should also mention that you don't need to have an account. So it's set up so that a teacher can get in, do a survey, enter their email in order to be able to verify it. That lets us make sure that they're not a robot, and then they're done. But if they want to, they can create an account. And if you want to, you can create an account too. And by you, I mean a school travel planning facilitator or champion or somebody who wants to do a little bit more. And some of the things that you can do if you create an account is you're able to do a little bit more than what a contributor is. So a teacher can do a survey, but you as a champion might want to, for example, upload a bunch of things or change some stuff in case there's a mistake. Or so for example, this is kind of how the hierarchy works. You've got all kinds of teachers who are just very quickly working on it, quickly as possible. Then you've got a next level, which is folks like Green Communities Canada or HASTE or Green Action Centre or anyone who likes to work on this. You've also got school divisions who might want to do some more interesting stuff. And then you've got, of course, the admin up at the top. And that's just, that's because there's people who monitor the server and make updates to the software and make sure it works. So the powerful new tools, so this is me logged in, for example. This happens to be my default school because I made a presentation recently in Russia. But if you look in the top corner, you'll see that you're able to do things like manage schools, upload a whole bunch of them. You're able to edit surveys, that kind of thing. So just play around a little bit, see what you can do. If you have any questions, of course, there is a quick start guide, and there's also some frequently asked questions up at the top in the menu. But the whole idea, yeah, is to get as many people as possible to use it. So one of the simplest things you can do is set up all your schools in one shot, for example. Most of you will, for example, Ontario has online downloadable spreadsheets of all of the schools in all the divisions in Ontario. So that makes it really easy to add an entire division at one shot and send out an email to a friendly superintendent. You can edit the surveys, and you may also be wondering what's next. The reason I say that is because anyone who's done school travel planning facilitation has probably seen there's a number of things that you do that could maybe benefit from an online platform. So you'll see, for example, increasingly parent surveys are being sent out so that they can be easily translated into different languages. Or you'll have gone on a walkabout and kids will have collected pictures, or you'll have done a compliance count at stop signs, or you'll have analyzed the bike racks around the school, that kind of thing. So just so you know, we are aware that there's more things that we could be doing, and what we'd like to do in the future is to be able to make that possible. And keep making BikeWalkRoll better. So the idea is to get better and better, become a true resource for everyone. These are just some ideas that we worked on and fleshed out, and we hope to one day build. So if you want to try it, you can do it. Please don't do it at a a real school if you're putting in fake data, but you can try it with fake data just so you don't have to actually be a teacher with a class in Antarctica. So if you go onto the main page and scroll down a little bit, you'll see there's a little tutorial, and that'll take you to Yuri the Yeti's school in Antarctica where you can do a practice survey. Thanks very much. Very glad to be here.
Thank you, Anders. You're slightly ahead of time. Congratulations. So I'm going to fire a couple of questions at you from the chat box while we have the time related to your presentation. So one was from Louise Bissonnette. She asked, would this be a daily survey?
That's a great question. So pedestrian and bicycle counting best practices are to focus on Tuesday through Thursday. And that's because Mondays and Fridays are often holiday days. Every school division is a little bit different. And of course, you can end up with a Tuesday with an in-service day, for example. So take anything with a grain of salt. But the key really is a replicability. So, and repeating. Sean, I know, is going to talk a little bit about their campaigns in Manitoba, which I think is a good best practice. But what I would tell, again, is not to create any barriers for anyone who wants to try it. Definitely one survey one day is often more data than many schools have collected ever. But if you're setting up something for folks, I would suggest that you focus on a week and that you try and do that same week the following year. One of the reasons for that is because then it allows you to get a rough idea of trends that are happening over time. And you can extrapolate some of the stuff that you don't know as long as you are doing it the same way each time, if possible. So like, for example, if you don't have time to do surveys in January, but you know the rough pattern of travel behavior for seasonally around Canada or in your province, then you can make some estimates based on the results that you did get at that original time, if that makes sense. There's a few different ways to do it, and I'll note two things that are in there that I didn't have time to cover in the quick start guide, but one is very important, and that's that we ask for grade level. So grade level is really helpful for us at getting at age groups. It allows you to, in the big data world, for example, compare with hospital data or chronic diseases and do research based on all kinds of things related to the downstream effects of transportation. So we do ask for age, and what that does is that, so even if you have, for example, age via the grade level, even if you do have a different teacher doing it or different kids in that class, which happens year to year, at least you'll be asking for the same subset, and you'll get an idea of what that subset of people or demographic or age group or grade level is doing year over year, if that answers that question.
Thanks, Anders. And I'll just give you one other question from Niagara School Travel Team, which was, is the BikeWalkRoll score by school? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you look at a map with a few different scores, you'll see that the schools have individual scores. Any school that's been entered has no score, so it has a little bit of a gray icon, and that one needs a survey to get started. So that's somebody who's entered their school into the database but hasn't yet started it. There is another view, again, in the quick start guide. I didn't get into the full breadth of what BikeWalkRoll can do, but you can also look at a school division, and that school division score is actually by division. And it can work in some mysterious ways a little bit, because you can have schools in that division that have done a lot of surveys, which will ultimately impact that visual display. But all of that is just basically to make it easy to have a quick look and a quick glance, but it's important to recognize that the real devil is in the details, so to speak. And that you can get at those details. This is really important, actually. So this is working basically on the open data principle. This whole project is that. Anyone can go in and download the data from a school or from that school division and analyze it. What that allows us to do is make easy partnerships with academia. It also allows you to turn around and do reports. And you'll see coming up later in some of the other presentations how they've been using that functionality to pull the data, query it, ask all kinds of questions. So like I say, that score is by school. It could be by division. You can make your own score based on any group of schools you wanted or any sort of time period you wanted if you wanted to display specific information.
Okay, thank you, Anders. There are more questions coming in related to your presentation. So I'm going to keep moving. Anders, if you want to type some responses to some of the questions in the chat, that's great. And we will come back to them at the end to review those.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take back the screen now. Okay, thanks everyone. So before we hand over to Sean and hear about how BikeWalkRoll is being used in Canada, I have another very quick poll question for you. So that's about to appear on your screen. So please vote. So we'd like to know, do you currently have an accurate measure of how students are traveling in your community? Okay, and I'll just give that a few more seconds for the last votes to come in. All right, and here are the results. So we got about three quarters of us do not have an accurate measure of how students are traveling to school at present. Great, thank you for participating in that. So onwards, I'm now going to hand over to Sean Carlson at Green Action Centre in Winnipeg, who's going to talk about BikeWalkRoll in action. Take it away, Sean. The screen is yours to share.
Hi, everybody. I think I should be unmuted, hey?
You are. We can hear you now, Sean.
Okay, perfect. So I'll get... Can you see my window okay, Kate, with my slideshow and everything?
Yeah. If you
okay, there should be a big Green Action Centre logo there.
Yep, you're good now.
Okay.
You're in presentation mode.
Perfect. Then I think I'm good. So hi, everybody. I'm going to jump right in. This presentation is really about the actual application use of BikeWalkRoll and some of the things we've noticed with teachers using it in practice. Sometimes, you design a tool and you expect people to use it a certain way, and they end up using it in different and creative new ways that are actually really, really smart. So I'm going to dive right in. The reason we developed BikeWalkRoll in Manitoba is, I think a lot of you can relate, we didn't have any data. We were seeing in places like the GTHA, there was some academic interest in collecting that information and understanding how active school travel works. You had, budding Vision Zero plans and stuff that were really looking at that. We didn't really have that. So I believe we started working on developing the app in sort of 2014 for the full maiden launch from 2015 to 2017 to develop this report called Making Children Count that we ended up distributing to superintendents across the province and politicians and stuff. We were really using it as a tool to illustrate the need for active school travel funding and get that institutional support that we didn't already have. We were very lucky that we did have some high-level support. Anders kind of identified that viral way of spreading things that we had. City councillors, we had the Minister of Education ask school divisions to participate, which you still didn't get universal participation, but we had about 305 schools out of the 600 or so schools in Manitoba. So that gave us a really, really, really strong baseline for what is active school travel like in Manitoba. Is it 10% of kids? Is it 50%? Like, who knows? So now we have an idea. So the way the system started and the way we continue doing it is that we have 3 provincial counts throughout the year. So at different times, just to get that those seasonal variations. So what we'll do is at the beginning of the school year, we'll send out an email to all We have a mailing list now, a MailChimp list from schools that have participated from way back in the initial Making Children Count data collection days. We also reach out to superintendents directly just to remind them, these are the counts in October and February and May, put them in your calendar, and then we'll remind them multiple other times. So about a month before the count, 2 weeks, and a week before. A lot of teachers are used to doing that by now in certain divisions that mandate BikeWalkRoll. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. And the way that we've done it is that I know it's not quite best practices, but because we're very wary of asking too much of teachers or constantly bombarding them with active school travel stuff, we do roll them into our events. So during iWalk, that's when our event or our count takes place in October. We just finished up our winter. I think a lot of you do Winter Walk Day. That was sort of the week. We roll it in as something that teachers and classrooms can do as a part of that event, just because we don't think we would get as much participation otherwise, and not diffuse the use of BikeWalkRoll as well. So what we did with that data, we actually had a data analyst look through it and come up with Manitoba's BikeWalkRoll score. So how many kids are walking, biking, and rolling to school? 37%. So we're hovering at about 1/3, a little more than 1/3. And with that data, it's so rich that if you wanted to analyze certain trends or break it down by age or classroom grade or a certain time period or days where the weather was inclement, you could, if you were able to manage that data or find someone that could. So one thing that our data analyst did is compared that with walkability scores for neighborhoods. So kind of linking those two data sets together. But it really is the sky's the limit. If you wanted to identify a certain trend, you probably have the ability to with BikeWalkRoll. So some of the things we've learned, even when school divisions mandate participation, you don't necessarily get every classroom participating every day. And we've kind of come to terms with this. Maybe you could address this if you were working really, really closely with schools as part of school travel planning or something like that. But we recognize that, where school divisions have a lot on their plate, the superintendent can't necessarily police every single school. We're a team of 3. We're just happy that they're participating and getting most of those days. Another interesting thing is that we found that phys ed teachers often who have multiple classes throughout the day, to make it easier for their schools to participate. I mean, maybe it's not ideal, but rather than doing the homeroom survey during attendance, they'll actually do this hands up survey at the beginning of their phys ed classes. So that way they don't have to chase down teachers if they feel like there's not enough buy-in. So that's kind of a creative way of getting some data. Another thing that I wish teachers wouldn't do, but is probably a necessary evil, is that they will still continue to do paper surveys and then compile that data and enter it manually. So we've had principals tell us that they've tried to get school teachers to do it, more automatically and in the digital way with BikeWalkRoll, but in the meantime, this is the best that they can do. So it's really not ideal and kind of actually adds more work, but it's something that we've noticed happens. So just recognize that is a possibility. And the last thing we found, Anders also mentioned this, is if you can link teachers directly to their school pages, it kind of eliminates that barrier of trying to find the main page or find their school on a map or something. And that can actually help reduce the amount of duplicate schools you can get, which is a pretty easy fix. If you see you have duplicate schools, getting those merged together isn't the end of the world, but it just kind of keeps things tidy and neat and everyone flowing along. So the way to do this, if you want to send sort of like a coordinated count or schools their individual pages, if you go to your school division page or your school board page, which you can access from, there's a bar at the top, very top of the BikeWalkRoll website where you can look them up that way. There's this coordinated count button. And what that does is it brings up sort of a template of, hi, we're looking to do this count across the division. Here's a list of all the schools associated with our division. I find it very helpful to copy and paste this into Microsoft Word and then use the alphabetizing feature for the schools, because sometimes you do get those duplicate schools with slightly different names. Sometimes it's easier for teachers to find their school when it's alphabetical. So it's kind of just something that I've noticed works better. It's just like a minor tweak that increases teachers' access to their page and prevents duplication. So looking at 2 different neighborhoods, we have one of the most basic functions of BikeWalkRoll is that at a glance, how is this community doing? So the one on the left is more of an inner city neighborhood. The one on the right is more of a suburban neighborhood. So you can see very clearly there's obvious differences in that the suburban neighborhood, for whatever reason, has far fewer kids walking. There's a lot more red and yellow. There's more green and orange in the one on the left. So very simple, but also very powerful to identify, you know, what are the factors here. We're in the third year of our BEST program, so that's bike education and skills training, where we're working with one of our school divisions on getting cycling safety embedded into their phys ed curriculum. And in the long term, we want to see that expanded and standardized across Manitoba. But one of the evaluation tools of that, along with the parent perception surveys, along with that, is using BikeWalkRoll to see, you know, are we seeing more kids biking because of this program? We like to use, or I've started using this recently, I find it very powerful, the idea of a proximity map in tandem with the BikeWalkRoll data. And I want to point out that that map on the left there has nothing to do with BikeWalkRoll. That's something that we made based on a school who we just plotted the addresses of all their students onto this map. So this could be completely for internal use. This never has to see the light of day. And Anders was saying that you have French immersion schools sometimes with larger catchment areas, students are coming from further distances. That school was under the perception that most of their kids were busing because they had to be bused. By having that data, where actually most of your students are within that 1.6 kilometer sort of walk zone circle, you can see, looking at how many kids are actually arriving on foot, was pretty striking. So, you know, distance is a significant factor and one of the main factors for why kids are driven. But sometimes the kids are not actually coming from as far as you think. So we need to dismantle those perceptions. Winnipeg is a weird city, from what I understand, as far as school divisions are concerned. My impression is that most cities have kind of one school division or maybe a couple. There's like the basic school division, then there's the Catholic school division. We have 6, and they all operate independently with their own budgets, their own policies, their own strategic plans. So there's good and bad things to that. One of the good things is we can go after those smaller school divisions and they can become champions, and those ideas can maybe diffuse a little quicker. In theory, one of the bad things is we don't really have that top-down authority of the Winnipeg citywide school division saying, we are doing BikeWalkRoll, you're all doing it. So we have 2 of those 6 school divisions that mandate BikeWalkRoll across their division for all their schools, whereas, you know, 1 or 2 of them are kind of like halfway and the other 2 can't be bothered. So we have different degrees of participation. We still maybe have those champion teachers in those schools, which is great because you can scale BikeWalkRoll up or down. If you have one school in a division where the division doesn't support and you're a passionate teacher, you can still get pretty reliable data or make that into a classroom activity to help you with your events or something, just to make it fun. So you don't necessarily need that institutional support, but of course it helps if you're trying to get that big data. And lastly, something I would love to see, we're in the process of looking at our pedestrian and cycling strategies in Winnipeg. Every 5 years they review it. We would love to see BikeWalkRoll become a standardized part of how they get data on children's transportation. And that's it. That's my bit. If you have any questions, you can add them in the chat box and maybe ask later.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sean. That was great. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving. And I was going to ask everyone another question. I was going to ask people in another little poll about whether it'd be useful to your community to know the mode share for school travel. And if the answer is yes, you can type ideas in the chat box about how this data could be useful in your community. But I'm not going to do the actual poll. I'm going to keep moving. And we're going to go east for our final presentation from Alex, Ricci, and Leslie Maxwell at the Student Transportation Services of Waterloo region. So Alex, if you want to now share your screen, and we will hand over to you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Alex, we can hear you well.
All right, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right. Here at Student Transportation Services, we've been using BikeWalkRoll with our travel planning schools to gather data on student transportation modes to help inform our interventions. During this time, we have learned some best practices when working with our schools to conduct BikeWalkRoll. We will share some of those findings here with you today. To start off, when introducing BikeWalkRoll to administrators and school travel planning committees, we like to introduce BikeWalkRoll as a first step in our school travel planning process. As BikeWalkRoll is the most rigorous survey for collecting transportation mode data, it accurately identifies how students are traveling to and from school. This allows us to make educated decisions about which interventions we could use to increase active transportation and school zone safety. Here in Waterloo region, vehicle traffic around the school site is a major issue. BikeWalkRoll helps us understand the amount of students who are taking the transportation mode they're actually assigned. Using this data, we can encourage students who are being driven to take the mode of transportation they're assigned. We also like to relay the benefits that this type of data provides. BikeWalkRoll provides a great baseline to evaluate the effectiveness of interventions both seasonally and yearly. It helps us engage stakeholders by showing them the data that they can understand and pass along to their higher-ups. Data like this allows planners at the city and school board to justify implementing traffic management interventions. The survey results can also be used as a motivational tool to encourage students to walk a block, to increase the school's overall BikeWalkRoll score, and to reduce vehicle traffic in front of the school. Additionally, it can inspire schools to have weekly or monthly walking events to help students get in the habit of walking to school. Another thing is that when we feel like we need more information about travel modes at a certain school, we sometimes like to follow BikeWalkRoll up with the Ontario Active School Travel Family Survey. We position the family survey as the second qualitative layer that helps answer the why when looking at the BikeWalkRoll data. When following up with the family survey, we like to use the online version as it is easy for schools to share with the community and receive their responses. So when introducing BikeWalkRolls to teachers, we found that these best practices led to highest completion rates and most accurate data. The first and most important was that BikeWalkRoll was introduced as mandatory by school administrators. We saw that when administrators made it mandatory for their staff to participate, we had much higher completion rates. Second was holding training sessions on how to conduct the survey with school staff. This session can be held by school travel planning facilitators, a champion administrator, teacher, or parent. We found that holding this session during regularly scheduled staff meetings increased attendance and engagement. We also found greater success when we held sessions that where the teachers actually engaged with the presentation by creating an account, running through a test survey on their own devices. This increased accuracy and reduced frustrations when conducting the survey in the classroom. We also distributed materials outlining a quick walkthrough of the survey process for teachers. So you can see it's on the side of the slide here. Having both physical and digital copies of this walkthrough available for teachers help ensure everyone could quickly learn the BikeWalkRoll survey process. Giving teachers the resources to make the first session go smoothly reduces class time used and increases the chances that they'll want to do it again. Fourth was to encourage teachers to conduct the survey daily with their morning attendance. This helps teachers schedule a time during the day to complete the survey. It also eliminates the buildup of records entered at the end of the week, which increases accuracy. One of our kindergarten teachers we work with made the survey into a small game where students would move to different areas of the classroom, which depending on how they got to school. When introducing BikeWalkRoll to schools, I let the principal decide on how they want to teach their staff about the process. While the best, most timely results were from schools where I presented the material to the staff. Schools where the administrator informed the staff were able to complete the data collection sessions with no major issues. All right. So here in Waterloo region, we created a short infographic outlining the results from the school's latest survey. We were careful to create something that could live on its own and that was easy to understand. This way, it could be easily shared with administrators, city or school board stakeholders, and the greater school community. As more bike walk roll sessions are held, the change in mode share over time can be seen by the community and stakeholders. This can provide motivation to those embracing active transportation and encouragement for those who are thinking about making that change. So Leslie will take over for the rest of our presentation.
Hi everyone, and thanks Alex for that rundown. I want to speak a little bit more to how we can use this data on a broader perspective. Well, how we're currently using it and how we want to use it in the near future. So currently our approach is to only deliver this or only ask for this data in the school travel planning schools that we're working with directly. We do that because we don't want to confuse the greater public, and we don't have the capacity to really offer that training across the board just yet. We have 160 schools or so. So we stick to the school travel planning schools only. And our hope is to show mode share shift over time. We collect in fall, winter, and spring. And we do that in order to, well, for two things, to show just what the difference is in the number of students walking based on the colder weather, and then also to prove to some of our stakeholders that there are still kids walking in the winter, and that can be a very powerful piece of data as well. We choose to ask for these surveys to be completed in our off celebration weeks. I saw in the chat box somebody was wondering if collecting on celebration weeks skews the data. I don't think it matters when you collect, as long as you're comparing year over year to the same weeks and that you're holding your events on the same weeks. We choose to do off celebration weeks because I want a real look at how people are getting to school on a regular basis. And so far that seems to be working for us. Our scores look really low right now, but to me, I just look at that as a window of opportunity to see those scores grow. We don't like to support any paper-based collection. It has happened, and when it happens, we encourage the school to enter their own data so that they understand the level of work that requires, the potential for human error in the transfer of that data, and the wasted paper. They need to see the wasted paper. Our boards both support paperless schools, so it's not hard for us to convince them that an online survey is the way to go. And then currently we share that data on a limited basis with our outside stakeholders. Somebody mentioned or asked how we can share it with cities. They're not aware of it unless we make them aware of it. They can see the scores online, but with my stakeholders at the School Travel Planning Steering Committee, which are 3 separate municipalities at this point and 2 school boards, we share that data fairly liberally. So we've kind of kept it to those stakeholders, but we want to share it more widely soon. So Alex, if you could advance the slide again for me. I appreciate that. We're sharing. So in the future, we want to look at this on a bigger scale. And I shouldn't say just in the future. This is already starting to happen for us. We have a lot of support in our region for active transportation interventions, be they for schools or not. I'd like to be able to support those plans. So you can see on this slide the article in the background that says cyclists come out in force to urge Kitchener to invest in bike infrastructure. I was one of those people, and I was there to give them numbers of student population along a proposed protected bike lane project. This data that shows how many kids actually walk and bike to schools along that corridor is very important, and will be very important as that project progresses. It helps to open citizens and councillors' eyes to the fact that our cities aren't really built for kids yet, and that there are a number of kids who this could impact, and who this could change the way that they see their city and the way that they get around in their city. So that was very powerful, and will continue to be very powerful for that. I intend to use this data the same way for our sidewalk infill requests. We have a few, well, at least one school that I'm working with right now, but I imagine there are others that will come across, schools without sidewalks across the street from the school or behind the school. So that limits how kids can get to school, specifically in the winter time, when they're then pushed out onto the roadway. So having the data of how many kids are actually walking to school and using those pathways is going to be very powerful for that this coming year. We also have had some municipal queries into and a proposal for a winter maintenance project. They wanted to see if the city of Kitchener would support a city maintained sidewalk project, and this kind of data, especially collected in the fall, winter, and spring, will help to support an argument for why we need to clear those pathways. If those numbers, if there's a huge variance between those two numbers, that would speak to the fact that those sidewalks may actually be impairing those kids from walking who normally would. And if there isn't much of a difference, we can continue to make the argument that kids are using those sidewalks anyways, and they should be maintained for them, for their safety, because we have lots of photo evidence and parent complaints about the lack of clearance of snow from sidewalks, pushing their kids out onto the roadway again, or stopping them from being able to walk to school with a stroller, etc. So this data is actually helping us to address policies and practices that can support active transportation on a more systemic level. And finally, I really hope to be like Sean one day and be able to, at least in the one board, you have this, to promote the idea of the systemic data collection in both of the boards that we serve. If we had data from those schools who are not implementing school travel planning, then we would have some nice comparators, first of all, and we could use those numbers to help us prioritize which schools we need to potentially work in next. So that systemic data collection across all schools and year over year would begin to tell a story about our community and our separate communities, but our community on whole as well, and how I guess effective our interventions have been. So I'm really looking forward to a moment or a time that we can be able to do that. I would like to address, somebody asked about ethics. Our research proposal, or research approval group, pardon me, was very happy that this tool was online and outward facing and very transparent, so that parents could look at the scores themselves immediately. That was one of the things that sold them on it. So we didn't really stumble on that at all. They liked that it was rigorous, and as Anders said way back when, what's measured gets managed, and they recognize that that the tool is first and foremost focused on program planning at the school level, and it's for the health and well-being of the children. It's for the safety of the children. And when they see and make that connection, the research committee turned and started working with us instead of against us. It sort of felt like, because they wanted to see it happen as well. So, there's lots of reasons why they want to work with you when you kind of convince them of why it's the best approach. So I guess, and somebody else had asked about whether students could do this, and I think the suggestion was that high school students and middle school students were ideal. We are running one project in a school, an inquiry-based learning project at an elementary school level, where grade 4s to 6s have been asked the question, how can we get our parents, they're meant to answer this question, how can we get our parents to leave their cars at home? And as part of that project, we're suggesting that they be the ones that collect this data so that they can really kind of tear into it and use it as they would to make their cases when they present that project to their school community, the city councilors, and the school board planners. So, so it's very exciting, and I have no doubt that they'll be able to do it with precision. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Leslie, and thanks for already answering some of the questions in the chat. There was another one just came in that was from Katie. She was asking, and I think you could answer with your experience, are teachers expected to use their own smartphones with the app for paperless data entry, or are they typically using an in-classroom computer or tablet?
Typically an in-class computer or tablet. All of our schools are outfitted, and the BikeWalkRoll actually works better on the desktop and the tablet format at this time.
Great, thank you, Leslie. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock, so it's officially reached the end of the webinar, but we will still be here, and we're going to work on some of the questions. For more information about BikeWalkRoll, go straight to bikewalkroll.org. There you can find these resources to help with frequently asked questions, troubleshooting, quick start guide, access to technical support, and also everyone who's on the presenting today are part of supportive organizations. You can reach them through bikewalkroll.org. If you are an organization who's interested in supporting BikeWalkRoll, you can also get in touch through the website. It would be great to hear from you. Okay, so we're going to go across, thank you, Anders, who has answered quite a few of the questions within the chat box. So do scroll through those, and we'll be making a record of the questions and answers. A quick question from Shannon for Leslie and Alex. I think this one is for you, Alex, from the data sheet that you produce. Shannon asks, how do you calculate the expected mode travel?
So at Student Transportation Services, we have a list of all the students at the school and what transportation modes they should be taking, whether they're in the walk zone or in the bus zone. So it really has most to do with distances from school and their area, their position in the catchment area.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, let's jump across to another question. I'm seeing, Anders, if there's some questions remaining to you. Let's see. Question from Vivian, which was, does the survey account for multimodal trips? Say a student walks, takes transit, then walks again to reach school, and it's a 50-50 walk transit split.
Hi there. Yeah, I just thank God you're asking me, because my fingers are so tired, and I was midway through that one. So Vivian, that's an excellent question. And when we started the second build phase, we actually started there trying to figure out a visual dialogue to be able to capture a school where 20% of the people biked to GO train station and then took a walk for the last mile. and there used to be a walk part way question on some of these surveys. We did a lot of soul searching and thinking as a team about that. And what you see there, the wording is pretty carefully chosen in order to make sure that you were asking the same question to everyone and it's always answered the same way. I won't be able to have time to go into it in detail here, but I'll say just two things. One is that it's we do have something kind of interesting to try and be able to capture trip chaining. That's, I would say, sort of 70% thought out, and we have some designs where because we started down that path. We ultimately decided not to build it. We stuck with something simpler with what's there. Maybe one day we'll find that it's useful, but it requires a little bit more thought to do that properly. And we removed the walk part way one in part because it wasn't returning the information that we hoped it was. There's also a bit of a confusing question to ask. And it's actually a multiple point question where you're asking about walking part way with biking or mostly with transit or cars. Yeah, it doesn't give you a lot of useful information because essentially everybody walks part way, at least even if it's on a bike from the bike rack. So anyway.
Thanks, Anders. Another question for you this one was from Pam. Is there a way for a school to document whether they are being supported by an AST coordinator or by public health, or whether they're doing some interventions? Is there any way for them to do that in BikeWalkRoll?
Yeah. What I would suggest is to contact us right now. There's two things. One, have a look at the top of the menu bar. We've added something in this build phase, which is to add organizations. So you'll see a number of supportive organizations, and then there's contact info there. Your question is, whose jurisdiction do we fall under, and how would we display that? We did consider that. We didn't end up building it. And so we haven't done that yet, but it is definitely possible. And I think it's a pretty good idea. Essentially there's two approaches to that we took. One was that we wanted to develop a forum. But it's a very complex thing, but basically the way the forum would work is that schools would be associated to specific school travel planning champions and school travel planning organizations, and they would know who to ask for questions. And that's important for us because sometimes we'll get a question, hey, what's about that campaign? And we'll forward it on because we tend to know who it is and that kind of thing. That's one part. And the other part is that what we want to do is we want to make it possible to upload specific information to that school's profile. So say you do a school travel plan, or say you do a bike rodeo, or say you do a special event. We want to be able to give facilitators and teachers to be able to document that. And we think the school profile page is a good place to do that. But basically one day, not yet.
Definitely in the future. Hope that will come. Thank you, Anders. And I think, Anders, maybe it'd be good to just, and possibly Sean join in. So Kelly Scott, who I know is based in Hamilton, was asking whether there have been any concerns about privacy from school boards, given that schools are identified in BikeWalkRoll. Leslie, you've already touched on this and how you've navigated that in Waterloo region. Sean and Anders, whether you have any perspective of any issues in Manitoba.
Yeah, I can answer that from a global perspective. Sean, did you want to answer that from locally first, or?
Sure, I could. This is kind of an interesting question that I'd never really encountered before the Active School Travel Summit a couple months back. And we haven't really had that issue. Even like the proximity map that I used in the presentation that actually had student addresses plotted on a map, when I asked the principal, can we use this? She was like, well, the students aren't identified. Yeah, go ahead. If this is going to get more kids or raise awareness of active school travel and its profile and help shift those modes, she was all for it. So it just hasn't really been an issue because individual kids aren't identified. It's general classrooms and no address data is available, so it hasn't been an issue in Manitoba, and I'm curious to see anyone who does encounter those problems. Maybe it's a good idea to sort of share how you navigate them so that other people who encounter the same thing don't have to sort of go through the whole reinventing the wheel of how to deal with that privacy issue.
And the way that I would answer that is is I would say that it's a problem that may not necessarily exist. What's interesting about it is that there are two ways to deal with privacy, and I mentioned this. I tried to answer one question in the chat box, but one of the ways to deal with privacy is to lock everything down. Another way to deal with that is to be completely open and transparent. And I think I can't say it much better than Leslie did, but about how school divisions appreciated the fact that, for example, parents and anybody could go and look at all the data and see really everything about it. If they had any questions, they could go and have a look. So and that way, because if you are collecting the data, then it's private in the sense that only some people have access, right? So I think this issue is so important that people are realizing that the more we can do and the more transparent we can do about school transportation specifically, the better. But I also think that norms around around privacy are changing. So I mentioned like the amount of selfies that are existing on Twitter and Instagram right now. Nobody would have imagined that in 1975, and they would probably have been horrified by that. Not that this has anything to do with it, because it's not actually individualized, but I think people just sort of understand that the concept of being open and transparent about big data like this is actually a really good idea. And so, yeah, we explicitly developed it to be open and shared in real time and to see what happens. And so far, I'm not really surprised that there isn't concerns being raised. And also the thing to mention is if you see your colleagues using it, or if you see how it's been used in Manitoba, or you see the value in it, it really only takes some people to start sharing their data for everyone else to be, oh, okay, we will too. And of course, everybody needs to go through ethics. Some school divisions, school boards are, and usually what that is, and in case anybody's never done that before, done research, it sounds a bit ominous, but really what it is it's an application form usually. It's a piece of paper, and then you have to describe just some aspects of what your research project is, and then they go and they can either approve it or not. I'm not aware of anyone who's not approved it and who's answered some of the questions, and I'm sure either Leslie or Sean would be able to share a template, and that's something that we could actually get up on the website is a research ethics approval application form and some of the typical questions they ask if anybody needs a hand in making it easy.
Yeah, Anders, just to break in there, the Ontario Active School Travel website has that template already on it. And I found that extremely helpful. They have answers that you can cut and paste from as well, and I guess personalize as needed. But it was extremely helpful, very thorough.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, we will be updating that sample ethics application so that it includes anything relevant to using BikeWalkRoll as an online data collection tool. To bring that up to date with the availability of this tool for doing classroom travel surveys. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I think there's one we'll do one last question that we have here. And Anders, you may want to comment on this one. It was from Craig, and he asked, have you thought about using this type of tool for workplaces on neighborhoods and communities?
That's a very good question. I forgot to answer you, Craig. Sorry. To be honest, yes, but not really in depth, because that's really not originally how it was designed. So some of the design of this is specifically for teachers sitting down in a classroom. So if you can imagine, it's a little bit tricky, but like as has been shown, high school students going around with iPads and junior high students and polling their, I suspect that the workplace version of this would be probably easier to handle just by email, where you would send individuals to go and describe their own travel habits. And that's actually really, really big business in Europe for workplaces that are trying to increase productivity and lower their health insurance and costs. Yeah, so that kind of travel demand management is a really good idea. We've used it a little bit in sort of exploratory projects to kind of think about that idea, but not yet. I actually think that you could probably build a tool very similar to this, and somebody could probably make some money off of it if they wanted to. But yeah, it's a really good question. Thanks for asking.
Okay, thank you. We have worked our way through all of the questions, either by answering them in the chat box or through discussion. Thank you so much to our presenters today for their time and expertise and knowledge. We will be posting the recording of this webinar on our website, and we'll also share the slides. And I think we'll document the questions and answers too. It's been great discussion, and we'd really like to capture that. So thanks to everyone for joining today. Stay tuned to future webinars by signing up for our newsletter, and follow us on social media to stay in the loop. We wish you a wonderful afternoon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.